When I first bought my cabin, I thought I had found a permanent escape from the chaos of everyday life. The world outside could be loud, crowded, and suffocating, but here among the towering pines and the glassy lake that reflected the sunrise like molten gold, everything was calm. The smell of pine needles underfoot, the rustle of wind through the branches, the distant cry of loons across the water, it felt like I had stepped into a sanctuary carved out of time itself. This cabin wasn't just wood and stone to me. It was a piece of my soul. I'd saved for years, cutting corners, working double shifts, and resisting the temptation of city luxuries just to afford it. The moment I signed the deed, I swore no one would ever take it away from me. But I hadn't counted on the HOA. From the very beginning, they circled like buzzards. The Homeowners Association ran the community like a little kingdom, and at the head of that throne was Linda, the kind of woman who wore her hair so tight it looked like it might snap and a smile so fake it could cut glass. Everyone called her Karen when she wasn't around, and honestly, the name fit. She always had something to say about my property. My pickup truck was too rugged for the pristine neighborhood image. The neatly stacked firewood on my porch was unsightly and unsafe. Even my dog, Max, who only barked when squirrels taunted him from the trees, was labeled a noise disturbance. Every week, a new letter appeared in my mailbox, thin envelopes filled with threats disguised as reminders. At first, I ignored them. I had weathered worse storms in life. But ignoring Karen was like ignoring a mosquito. It didn't go away, it just kept coming back louder, more persistent, and more determined to ruin your peace. One brisk autumn morning, as fog rolled across the lake and the smell of damp earth lingered in the air, I stepped outside to find something taped to my cabin door. Unlike the usual white wall letter, this one was a glaring shade of orange that practically screamed for attention. I peeled it off and read, 72 hours to sell or vacate. Immediate action required. My heart sank, then surged with fury. I scanned the notice again, thinking it must be some cruel prank. But no, it was stamped with the HOA's seal, signed in bold ink by none other than Linda herself. The letter claimed my cabin violated long-standing HOA codes, and that if I failed to comply within 72 hours, I would face serious legal consequences. The worst part wasn't even the absurdity of it, it was the bold paragraph at the bottom: failure to comply may result in repossession and reassignment of property to compliant owners. They weren't just fining me. They were threatening to steal my home. My hands trembled as I clenched the paper, not out of fear but out of rage. Every sacrifice I had made, every long night I had worked, every dream I had poured into this place, they thought they could erase all of that with a single piece of paper. I stormed back inside, Max trotting nervously behind me, sensing my mood. I paced the cabin, my boots echoing against the wooden floorboards as my mind raced. This wasn't just harassment anymore. This was war, and what the HOA didn't know, what Karen couldn't possibly imagine, was that I wasn't just some weekend wanderer, some naive cabin owner too weak to fight back. Behind my quiet exterior, I carried experience, knowledge, and power that would turn their world upside down. Because I hadn't simply bought this cabin. Months earlier, I had bought something much bigger, a majority stake in the land development trust that controlled the very ground beneath this neighborhood. I remembered that day clearly. While most buyers simply signed their HOA agreements without a second thought, I had dug deeper. Something in me had whispered, know what you're getting into. And so I did. I discovered that the HOA didn't actually own the land outright. They leased it from a private trust, one that had been struggling financially for years. So I had made an offer. A quiet purchase, done under the radar. With some shrewd investment and a few well-placed signatures, I became the controlling stakeholder in that trust. To me, it was just insurance. I never thought I'd need it. Until now. I sat at my cabin table, the orange notice lying crumpled beside my coffee mug, and let the weight of the moment settle in. The HOA thought they had me cornered. They thought I would panic, pack up, and slink away in defeat. They thought they could bully me like they had bullied countless others before. But what they didn't realize was that their threats had just triggered the one man in the neighborhood they could never afford to cross. A slow smile spread across my face as I imagined the look on Linda's when she discovered the truth. She believed she was queen of this little kingdom, untouchable and absolute. She had no idea her throne was built on land I now controlled. I picked up the orange notice, smoothed out the creases, and pinned it to my fridge like a trophy. Max tilted his head, watching me with curious eyes as if he knew something big was about to happen. Don't worry, Boy, I said, scratching behind his ears. We're not going anywhere. For years, I had endured their nonsense. For years, I had paid their ridiculous dues, sat quietly while they nitpicked every inch of my property, and swallowed my pride when they whispered behind my back. But this was the line they should never have crossed. I straightened my shoulders, my resolve solidifying with every breath. They had given me 72 hours to sell my cabin. But in 72 hours, I would show them just how badly they had underestimated me. This wasn't just about saving my home anymore. It was about standing up to the kind of people who thought intimidation could replace justice. It was about showing them that their empire of fear could crumble with a single move. And I already knew exactly how I was going to make that move. The next HOA meeting was held in their usual place, the so-called community hall, which was really just a glorified shed with fold-out chairs and bad lighting. When I walked in, the board members fell silent. Linda sat at the head of the table, smug as ever, her arms folded like she already won. "You got our notice," she said, her voice dripping with mock sympathy. "We expect you'll be moving out soon." I placed the crumpled paper on the table and leaned in. "Actually, I came to talk about your rent." Her brow furrowed. "Or what?" I smiled slowly. "You see, the HOA doesn't own this land. You lease it, from the development trust. And guess who just bought controlling interest in that trust?" The room went dead quiet. I pulled out a folder and laid the paperwork on the table for all of them to see. Their eyes widened as they skimmed the documents. It was ironclad. I now controlled their lease agreements, their contracts, and the very ground beneath their perfectly manicured lawns. "I'm raising your rent," I said calmly, my voice steady but sharp enough to cut the silence. "Starting tonight, your monthly HOA property rent will be tripled." Gasps erupted around the room. A couple of members shouted in protest, but Linda's face turned beet red, her hands shaking as she tried to keep control. "You can't do this," she snapped. "Oh, but I can," I replied, sliding the official stamped notice across the table toward her. "And I just did. If you fail to pay, your properties are in violation of the lease, and you'll be evicted. From the homes you're so desperate to protect." The power dynamic flipped in an instant. The people who had bullied me, harassed me, and tried to steal my home suddenly realized they were standing on ground that no longer belonged to them. For the first time, Karen had no words. Within days, the neighborhood was in chaos. Homeowners who had once sneered at me were now knocking on my cabin door, pleading for leniency. They had no idea the HOA didn't actually own the land they lived on, they'd been fooled into thinking they were untouchable. Now, they were scrambling to figure out how to pay triple rent on top of their mortgages. Linda tried everything to fight back. She threatened lawsuits, screamed at town hall, and even tried rallying neighbors to stand against tyranny. But the contracts were airtight. She had no legal standing. One by one, board members resigned, not willing to risk losing their homes over her obsession with control. I watched it all unfold from the porch of my cabin, sipping coffee while the world turned upside down for the people who thought they could push me out. It was more than just revenge, it was justice. They wanted to make an example out of me, but instead, I had made an example out of them. The 72-hour notice was long forgotten. My cabin still stood strong, untouched, more mine than ever before. In the HOA, they weren't issuing threats anymore. They were too busy trying to pay their new rent on time. As for Karen, she eventually moved out in shame, her house sold at a loss she swore would ruin her. I didn't shed a tear. She had built her empire on fear and intimidation, and I had dismantled it with a single stroke of a pen. For the first time in years, the neighborhood was quiet, not the uneasy quiet of before, but the peaceful kind. My cabin was safe, my land was mine, and the HOA had learned the one lesson they never thought they'd face. Sometimes, the guy you think is powerless is the one holding all the cards.